The autumn rain pelted against the windows of Maggie Chen's modest apartment in Chesapeake, Virginia, creating rivulets that distorted the world outside into abstract patterns of light and shadow. At 61, Maggie had grown accustomed to watching life through distorted lenses, first through the thick glasses necessitated by her degenerative eye condition, and later through the lens of chronic pain that had become her constant companion since the accident 15 years ago. Few people knew the truth about that accident. Fewer still knew about the settlement that followed, a substantial sum awarded after a devastating case of medical malpractice had left her permanently disabled. The botched spinal surgery that was supposed to alleviate her chronic back pain had instead damaged critical nerves, leaving her with limited mobility and a lifetime of managing complex medication regimens. The seven-figure settlement had been both a blessing and a curse, providing financial security while serving as a constant reminder of what she'd lost. Maggie had made a conscious decision early on to keep the settlement secret from her family, particularly from her younger sister, Victoria. Victoria Chen Bradley had reinvented herself over the years, transforming from a struggling real estate agent into what she called a lifestyle transformation coach and self-help author. Her book, Victorious Living: How I Conquered Adversity and You Can Too, had become a modest success in certain circles, though Maggie suspected most of the five-star reviews came from Victoria's carefully cultivated network of fellow coaches who traded favorable reviews like baseball cards. The irony wasn't lost on Maggie. Victoria's entire brand was built on overcoming adversity, yet she'd never faced a genuine hardship that wasn't of her own making. Every crisis in Victoria's life, from her 3 divorces to her multiple failed business ventures, had been cushioned by Maggie's silent financial interventions. Over the past 15 years, Maggie had channeled more than $100,000 to her sister through various means, covering mortgage payments when Victoria's coaching business hit rough patches, paying for her nephew Jason's college tuition when Victoria had blown his college fund on a revolutionary MLM scheme, and countless smaller bailouts disguised as birthday gifts or loans that both sisters knew would never be repaid. Victoria never questioned where Maggie's money came from. In her narcissistic worldview, she simply assumed her disabled older sister had been frugal with her modest disability checks and part-time remote bookkeeping work. It never occurred to her to dig deeper, to wonder how someone living on supposed government assistance could be so consistently generous. Victoria was too busy promoting her image as a self-made success story to examine the foundation upon which her success was built. The family dynamics had been established long before the accident. As children of immigrant parents who had fled China during the Cultural Revolution, Maggie and Victoria had been raised with vastly different expectations. Maggie, the eldest, had been taught to be responsible, self-sacrificing, and invisible. Victoria, born 8 years later when their parents had finally achieved middle-class stability, was treated as the golden child, brilliant, beautiful, destined for greatness. Their parents, now deceased, had inadvertently created a toxic dynamic that persisted well into adulthood. Maggie was expected to support Victoria's dreams while suppressing her own. When Maggie had wanted to pursue a master's degree in library science, her parents had convinced her to work instead to help pay for Victoria's undergraduate education at a prestigious private university. When Maggie had fallen in love with a kind-hearted carpenter named David, her family had mocked her for her low standards while celebrating Victoria's engagement to a flashy investment banker who would become her first ex-husband. The accident had changed everything and nothing simultaneously. The chronic pain and limited mobility had given Maggie an excuse to withdraw from family gatherings, but Victoria had found ways to maintain her grip. She would call Maggie at all hours, dumping her emotional baggage while never once asking how Maggie was managing. She would send passive-aggressive texts about how some people use their disabilities as excuses while in the same breath hinting that she needed another loan to cover her latest business investment. The exploitation had evolved into an art form over the years. Victoria had mastered the delicate balance of keeping Maggie close enough to be useful while maintaining enough distance to avoid any genuine emotional obligation. Family gatherings, when Maggie could attend them, had become orchestrated performances where Victoria would showcase her success while subtly undermining Maggie's worth. "Oh, Maggie's here!" Victoria would announce with false brightness when Maggie would arrive at family dinners, her cane clicking against the marble floor of Victoria's oversized colonial home. "Everyone, make room for her, you know how difficult it is for her to get around." The emphasis on difficult was always pronounced, accompanied by a pitying look that made Maggie feel like a burden rather than a guest. The public humiliation was constant but carefully calibrated. Victoria would regale dinner guests with stories of Maggie's limitations, always framed as inspiration porn. "My sister is so brave," she would say, clutching her wine glass like a prop. "Despite everything, she still manages to do her little bookkeeping job from home. It's so important for people with disabilities to feel useful, isn't it?" The condescension dripped like honey, sweet and suffocating. Meanwhile, Victoria's son Jason, now 28 and working as a marketing director in Richmond, had absorbed his mother's attitudes. He treated Aunt Maggie with polite indifference, accepting her generous birthday and Christmas gifts without genuine gratitude, viewing her presence at family events as an obligation to be endured rather than enjoyed. Maggie had paid for his entire undergraduate education, nearly $120,000, but as far as Jason knew, it had come from his mother's successful coaching business. The financial manipulation extended beyond direct payments. Victoria had developed a system of hints and suggestions that would inevitably lead to Maggie offering help. "I don't know how I'm going to make the mortgage payment this month," she would sigh during their weekly phone calls. "But don't worry about me, I'll figure something out. I always do." That's what I teach my clients, resilience in the face of adversity. Within hours, Maggie would transfer funds to Victoria's account, the transaction never acknowledged beyond a brief "thanks, sis" text. Victoria's coaching business itself was a masterclass in exploitation. She charged desperate clients thousands of dollars for transformation packages that consisted largely of recycled motivational quotes and generic advice plagiarized from better-known self-help authors. Her signature course, Victoria's Mindset Mastery, promised to teach clients how to overcome any obstacle and create unlimited abundance. The irony that Victoria's own abundance came from her disabled sister's settlement money was lost on her paying customers. The worst part was the gaslighting. Whenever Maggie would hint at feeling overwhelmed or mention her own financial concerns, Victoria would launch into coach mode. "You know, Maggie, I've been thinking about your situation," she would say, her voice taking on the practiced empathy she used with clients. "Have you considered that you might be using your disability as a crutch? I mean, energetically speaking. In my new chapter, did I mention I'm writing another book? I talk about how we create our own limitations. Maybe if you invested in yourself more, took one of my courses, you could break free from this victim mentality." The suggestion that Maggie, who had endured botched surgery, years of legal battles, and chronic pain while single-handedly keeping Victoria afloat, was playing the victim was so absurd it would have been laughable if it weren't so painful. But Maggie had learned to bite her tongue, to nod and make noncommittal sounds while Victoria pontificated about manifestation and abundance mindsets. The breaking point came on an unseasonably warm October evening. Victoria had planned an elaborate welcome home party for Jason, who was returning from a 6-month assignment in London. The party was, in typical Victoria fashion, less about celebrating Jason and more about showcasing Victoria's success as a mother and entrepreneur. She had rented out a waterfront venue, hired a local jazz quartet, and invited what seemed like half of Chesapeake's social climbing set. Maggie hadn't wanted to attend. For the past 2 weeks, she had been dealing with a serious medication error. Her pharmacy had filled her prescription with the wrong dosage of her nerve pain medication, and the resulting complications had left her hospitalized for 3 days. The error had triggered a cascade of problems: severe withdrawal symptoms when the dosage was corrected, dangerous interactions with her other medications, and a blood pressure spike that had terrified her medical team. She was still recovering, still adjusting to the corrected medications, still dealing with the tremors and cognitive fog that made even simple tasks challenging. But Victoria had insisted. "You have to come, Maggie. Jason specifically asked if you'd be there. Plus, I'm announcing my new book deal. You wouldn't want to miss that, would you?" The guilt trip was expertly deployed, hitting all of Maggie's buttons. Despite her better judgment, despite her doctor's recommendation to rest, Maggie had agreed to make an appearance. The venue was everything Victoria aspired to be: ostentatious, gleaming, and ultimately hollow. Crystal chandeliers reflected off the water, creating patterns that made Maggie's medication-addled brain swim. She found a quiet corner and tried to make herself invisible, but Victoria had other plans. "Everyone, everyone!" Victoria called out, tapping a champagne flute with a silver spoon. "Before we toast Jason's return, I want to take a moment to acknowledge someone very special. My sister Maggie managed to join us tonight, despite her challenges. Maggie, stand up so everyone can see you." Maggie's legs trembled as she stood, using her cane for support. The room's eyes turned to her, expressions ranging from polite interest to poorly concealed pity. The tremor in her hands, a side effect of the medication adjustment, was visible even from across the room. "Maggie has been going through a tough time lately," Victoria continued, her voice taking on that false concern that Maggie had come to despise. "Some complications with her medications, you know how it is with chronic conditions, there's always something. But she's here, and that's what matters. Though I do worry about her sometimes. The victim mentality can be so limiting. In fact, in my new book, Victory Over Victimhood, I discuss how family members can sometimes enable." The room spun. Maggie's vision blurred, her legs buckled, and she collapsed. The crash of her fall, the cane clattering against the marble floor, the gasps of the crowd, it all seemed to happen in slow motion. As she lay there, struggling to regain her bearings, she heard Victoria's voice, not rushing to help, but continuing her speech. "Oh my goodness, this is exactly what I was talking about. The need for attention can manifest in such dramatic ways. Someone please help her, Jason, call 911. Everyone else, please, don't let this ruin the evening." Maggie would be mortified if she knew she'd disrupted the party. The ambulance ride was a blur of lights and sounds. Maggie's blood pressure had spiked dangerously high, a combination of the medication errors' lingering effects and the stress of public humiliation. The EMTs worked efficiently, their professionalism a stark contrast to the circus she'd just escaped. At Chesapeake General Hospital, Maggie was admitted for observation. The attending physician, Dr. Sarah Martinez, was genuinely concerned. "Ms. Chen, your medication history shows some serious errors in dispensing. Combined with your existing conditions and the stress you've clearly been under, we need to monitor you carefully. Is there someone we should call? Family?" Maggie almost laughed. "My sister was at the party. She's probably still there." Dr. Martinez frowned at something in Maggie's chart. "The woman who called 911 said you were being dramatic?" "That sounds like Victoria," Maggie said quietly. Over the next 24 hours, as Maggie lay in the hospital bed, the full weight of her situation crystallized. Victoria hadn't come to visit. She had, however, found time to post on social media. Maggie, scrolling through her phone with trembling fingers, found the posts that would change everything. "Difficult night, friends. My sister had an episode at Jason's welcome home party. As someone who has dedicated her life to helping others overcome their limitations, it's particularly painful to watch a loved one choose victimhood. But as I always say, we can't save those who don't want to be saved." The party continued. Jason deserved his celebration, and I'm proud to announce that my new book, Victory Over Victimhood, will be released next spring. #resilience, #boundaries, #victory mindset. The comments were a mix of sympathy for Victoria and judgment for Maggie. "You're so strong, dealing with such a difficult situation. Some people just want attention. Your poor sister, but you can't let her drag you down." But one comment stopped Maggie cold. It was from Jason. "Thanks for not letting Aunt Maggie's drama ruin my night, Mom." Classic attention-seeking behavior. Maybe it's time to distance ourselves. Your new book sounds perfect for people like her. People like her. As if Maggie hadn't paid for his education, his car, his apartment deposit in Richmond. As if she hadn't sacrificed her own dreams and health to prop up their comfortable lives. The next morning brought more betrayal. Victoria finally called, not to check on Maggie's health, but to berate her. "Do you have any idea how embarrassing that was?" Victoria's voice was sharp through the phone. "I had important clients there, Maggie. publishers, media contacts. And you had to make it all about you, didn't you? This victim complex of yours is getting out of control. I think you need help, real help. She stared at the ceiling of the hospital
I'm willing
room,
to offer
at
you
the
a
water
discount on
stains
my
that
course.
formed patterns like clouds,
Maggie hung
and
up.
made a decision that had been 15 years in the making. Upon her discharge from the hospital 2 days later, Maggie went home and began the methodical process of reclaiming her life. She opened her laptop and pulled up the elaborate spreadsheet she'd maintained for 15 years, every payment to Victoria, every tuition check for Jason, every mortgage payment, utility bill, and car insurance premium she covered. The total was staggering, $247,832. But the money wasn't what hurt the most. It was the realization that she'd purchased nothing with that $250,000. Not love, not respect, not even basic human decency. She'd simply enabled Victoria's delusions and funded her exploitation of others. Maggie's first call was to her lawyer, Patricia Yamamoto, who had handled her malpractice settlement years ago. Patricia, I need to make some changes to my financial arrangements. I've been supporting my sister anonymously through various channels. I want it all stopped immediately. Patricia, who had warned Maggie about family financial entanglements years ago, was professionally supportive. I'll help you close every avenue. But Maggie, are you prepared for the fallout? I've been preparing for 15 years without knowing it, Maggie replied. The next step was harder but necessary. Maggie had been paying Victoria's mortgage through an automatic transfer disguised as a Veterans Assistance Program that Victoria believed she qualified for through her ex-husband's military service. The program was fictional. Maggie had created the elaborate ruse with the help of a sympathetic bank manager who'd agreed to process the monthly payments discreetly. Victoria's car payments came through a supposed women entrepreneurs grant that was actually Maggie's money filtered through a shell organization. Jason's student loans, which Victoria believed were in forbearance, were actually being paid in full by Maggie every month. One by one, Maggie canceled everything. The mortgage payment that was due in 3 days wouldn't come. The car payment scheduled for next week would bounce. The insurance premiums, the utility bills, the country club membership, all of it would come crashing down at once. But Maggie wasn't done. She had one more card to play, one that would reveal the depth of Victoria's dependence and delusion. She compiled every financial record, every transfer, every receipt, and created a comprehensive document titled The Real Story of Victoria's Living. Then she did something she'd never done before. She wrote her own story. The blog post was simple, honest, and devastating. She detailed the medical malpractice that had left her disabled, the settlement that had provided her with financial security, and her decision to secretly support her family. She included receipts, literally. Screenshots of transfers, copies of tuition payments, mortgage documents. She revealed how Victoria's entire successful lifestyle was built on Maggie's suffering and generosity. But she didn't publish it. Not yet. Instead, she sent a copy to Victoria with a simple note: you have 48 hours to publicly apologize for your treatment of me at Jason's party and to acknowledge the truth about your success. If you don't, this goes live on every social media platform, and I send copies to your publisher, your clients, and Jason's employer. Victoria's response was predictable and swift. She showed up at Maggie's apartment unannounced, pounding on the door with a fury that echoed through the hallway. "How dare you!" she screamed when Maggie finally opened the door. "This is blackmail. This is extortion. I'll sue you for defamation." Maggie, leaning on her cane but standing straighter than she had in years, remained calm. "It's all true, Victoria. Every word, every receipt. Your entire life is built on my money, my sacrifice. And you had the audacity to humiliate me while I was suffering from a medication error that could have killed me." Victoria's face cycled through emotions: rage, disbelief, and finally, a dawning horror as the implication sank in. You've been paying my mortgage? That's impossible. I qualified for that veterans program." "There is no veterans program, Victoria. It was me. All of it was me." The transformation in Victoria was remarkable. The polished life coach facade crumbled, revealing something desperate and ugly underneath. "You can't do this to me. I have a reputation, clients, a book deal." "Built on lies and my money," Maggie interrupted. "You wrote a book about overcoming adversity when you've never faced real adversity in your life. You teach people about financial abundance while secretly depending on your disabled sister. You talk about victim mentality while being the biggest victim of your own delusions." Victoria tried every manipulation tactic in her arsenal. She cried, she raged, she pleaded. She even tried to gaslight Maggie one more time. "This is your medication talking. You're not thinking clearly. You're having some kind of breakdown." "The only breakdown happening here is yours," Maggie said firmly. "You have 42 hours left to make this right, or everyone knows the truth." After Victoria left, alternating between threats and tears, Maggie received a call from Jason. His entitled anger was palpable through the phone. "Aunt Maggie, Mom told me what you're doing. This is insane. You can't destroy her life like this." "I'm not destroying anything, Jason. I'm simply stopping my support and telling the truth." "Did she mention that I paid for your entire college education?" The silence on the other end was deafening. That's not true. Mom paid for college with her business earnings." Maggie emailed him the receipts. "Every tuition payment, every housing deposit, every textbook purchase. Your mother hasn't earned enough from her coaching business to pay for a semester, let alone 4 years. Everything you have, everything she has, came from the settlement I received after a botched surgery left me permanently disabled. The same disability you mocked at your welcome home party." Jason's response, when it finally came, was a weak, "I didn't know." "No," Maggie agreed. "You didn't know because you never cared enough to ask. You accepted the narrative that I was a burden, a victim, someone seeking attention, because it was easier than seeing the truth." The 48 hours passed without Victoria's apology. Maggie knew it would. Victoria's entire identity was built on the lie of her self-made success. To admit the truth would be to destroy herself in a way that mere financial ruin couldn't touch. So Maggie published everything. The response was immediate and explosive. Maggie's blog post, shared initially by a few disability advocates who followed her sparse social media presence, went viral within hours. Self-help author's success built on disabled sister's secret support became the headline that destroyed Victoria's carefully constructed world. Victoria's publisher called within 6 hours of the post going live. The conversation, which Victoria had on speakerphone while Maggie was present, she'd come to beg one last time, was brutal. "Miss Bradley, we've seen the allegations. They're lies." Victoria interrupted desperately. "My sister is mentally ill, she's on heavy medications. She has receipts, Ms. Bradley. Financial documents. We've had our legal team review them. They appear to be authentic. We're terminating your book contract immediately. We'll also be reviewing your previous book for potential plagiarism, as several passages have been flagged as suspiciously similar to other works." Victoria's clients began canceling within days. Her Victorious Mindset Mastery course, which had a waiting list, suddenly had no enrollees. Her speaking engagements were canceled. The women's entrepreneur group she belonged to quietly removed her from their roster. But the financial collapse was even swifter. Without Maggie's invisible support, Victoria's house of cards crumbled in weeks. The mortgage company called about the missed payment. The car dealership sent a repo notice. The utilities sent shut-off warnings. For the first time in 15 years, Victoria faced actual adversity, and she had no idea how to handle it. Her response was to double down on the victim narrative, but now she cast Maggie as the villain. She posted increasingly unhinged social media rants about family betrayal and sabotage from jealous relatives. She tried to spin it as a test, a challenge that would make her comeback story even more powerful. But the internet had receipts, and every attempt to rehabilitate her image only made things worse. Jason, meanwhile, faced his own reckoning. His employer, a marketing firm that prided itself on ethical business practices, called him in for a meeting. While he hadn't done anything wrong professionally, the revelation that he'd publicly mocked his disabled aunt who had paid for his education didn't reflect well on the company's values. He wasn't fired, but he was passed over for a promotion he'd been certain was his. The extended family, who had always taken Victoria's side, were forced to confront uncomfortable truths. Cousin Linda, who had once called Maggie pathetic for missing a family reunion due to pain, learned that Maggie had secretly paid for her daughter's medical bills when Linda had mentioned them to Victoria. Uncle Robert, who had lectured Maggie about trying harder to overcome her disability, discovered that the loan Victoria had given him for his business had actually come from Maggie. 3 months after Maggie's revelation, Victoria was admitted to Chesapeake Psychiatric Hospital. The admission was voluntary, but only technically. Jason had found her in her empty house. The bank had begun foreclosure proceedings, surrounded by vision boards and affirmation cards, insisting that she could manifest her way out of the situation if she just believed hard enough. The psychiatrist's assessment was damning. Victoria had developed what they termed a delusional disorder with narcissistic features. She genuinely couldn't accept that her success had been artificial. Her mind had created elaborate alternative explanations. Maggie had stolen from her, had sabotaged her success out of jealousy, had used dark energy to manifest Victoria's downfall. Maggie visited once. The meeting was supervised, at the doctor's request. Victoria, wearing a hospital gown instead of her usual designer clothes, looked smaller, older, more fragile than Maggie had ever seen her. "Why?" Victoria asked, her voice hoarse from medication or crying or both. "Why did you destroy me?" Maggie's response was gentle but firm. "I didn't destroy you, Victoria. I stopped enabling you. There's a difference. You destroyed yourself the moment you chose to build your life on lies and other people's suffering." "But I'm your sister," Victoria whispered. "Yes," Maggie agreed. "And for 15 years, I acted like it. I supported you, sacrificed for you, endured humiliation for you. But you never once acted like my sister. You acted like I was your servant, your bank account, your cautionary tale. I didn't destroy our relationship, Victoria. You did, one cruel word at a time." Victoria's recovery, if it could be called that, was slow and incomplete. After her release, she moved in with Jason, who had relocated to a smaller apartment after his career stalled. She attempted to rebuild her coaching business under a different name, but the internet never forgets. Every new venture was quickly linked to her past, and the comment sections were brutal. She tried to write a comeback book, From Victory to Victim, My Journey Through Family Betrayal. No publisher would touch it. She self-published on Amazon, where it garnered a handful of reviews, mostly negative, calling out her continued refusal to take responsibility. While Victoria spiraled, Maggie flourished in ways she hadn't thought possible. Free from the emotional and financial drain of supporting her sister, she invested in herself for the first time in decades. She hired a new pain management specialist who actually listened to her, adjusting her medications properly and recommending alternative therapies. She joined a chronic pain support group, where she met others who understood the daily struggle of invisible disabilities. For the first time, she didn't feel alone or ashamed. She also joined an online community of medical malpractice survivors. Her story resonated with many who had faced similar situations, not just the medical trauma, but the family dynamics that followed. She became a moderator, then an advocate, helping others navigate the complex emotions of survival and family exploitation. The money she'd been hemorrhaging to Victoria was redirected toward her own life. She moved from her cramped apartment to a beautiful, accessible condo with a water view. She hired a personal trainer who specialized in adaptive fitness, slowly building strength within her limitations. She even adopted a therapy dog, a golden retriever named Hope, who provided companionship and emotional support. But perhaps the most significant change was in how she viewed herself. For 15 years, she'd internalized Victoria's narrative that she was broken, burdensome, less than. Now, she recognized her own strength. She had survived medical malpractice, chronic pain, family exploitation, and public humiliation. She had maintained her dignity and compassion even when faced with cruelty. She was, she realized, genuinely victorious in ways Victoria could never understand. She began writing, not for publication, but for herself. Essays about resilience that didn't minimize struggle. Poems about pain that didn't demand inspiration. Stories about survival that honored the difficulty of simply existing some days. Her writing was honest, raw, and beautiful in its refusal to package suffering as a stepping stone to success. A local disability rights organization discovered her blog and invited her to speak at their annual conference. Standing at the podium, cane in hand, Maggie told her story, not as revenge porn or family drama, but as a testament to the complex reality of disability, family, and financial abuse. "We're told that family is everything," she said to the packed auditorium. "That blood is thicker than water. But I learned that blood can also be toxic. That family can be the source of our deepest wounds. And sometimes, the greatest act of self-love is recognizing that we deserve better, even if that means standing alone." The response was overwhelming. Attendees approached her afterward with their own stories of family exploitation, medical gaslighting, and financial abuse. She realized that her story wasn't unique, it was devastatingly common, just rarely spoken about. 5 years have passed since the welcome home party that changed everything. Maggie, now 66, lives a life she couldn't have imagined during those dark years of exploitation. She's published a memoir, Invisible Foundations, a memoir of disability, family, and finding myself. Unlike Victoria's self-help platitudes, Maggie's book offers no easy answers or triumphant narratives. Instead, it provides honest reflection on the complexity of chronic illness, family dysfunction, and the long journey towards self-acceptance. The book has become recommended reading in several disability studies programs. Her relationship with Jason has slowly, tentatively, begun to heal. After his mother's breakdown and his own career setbacks, he reached out to Maggie with a genuine apology. "I was raised to see you as less than," he admitted during a difficult conversation. "Mom always portrayed you as this tragic figure who needed pity but not respect. I never questioned it because it was easier not to. I'm sorry, Aunt Maggie. You deserve better from all of us." They meet for coffee once a month now. It's awkward and stilted, but it's honest. Jason has started volunteering at a disability advocacy center, trying to unlearn the ableism he absorbed throughout his childhood. He's also in therapy, working through the revelation that his entire childhood was funded by the aunt he dismissed and mocked. Victoria remains a shadow of her former self. She works as a receptionist at a dental office, having abandoned any pretense of being a life coach. She's sent Maggie several letters over the years, sometimes apologetic, sometimes accusatory, always stopping short of true accountability. Maggie doesn't respond. She's learned that forgiveness doesn't require reconciliation, and that some relationships are better left buried. The extended family has fractured and reformed in unexpected ways. Some relatives, horrified by the revelation of how they treated Maggie, have reached out with genuine apologies and attempts at reconnection. Others, unable to face their complicity, have disappeared entirely. Maggie has found peace with both responses. She's learned that chosen family, her support group friends, her advocacy community, her neighbors who check on her during bad pain days, can be more meaningful than blood relations. Her health remains challenging. The nerve damage from the botched surgery is permanent, and she still navigates the complex world of medication management and chronic pain. But she does so now with proper support, without shame, and most importantly, without the added burden of carrying someone else's life on her shoulders. On quiet evenings, Maggie sits on her balcony with hope curled at her feet, watching the sun set over the Chesapeake Bay. She thinks sometimes about Victoria, about the sister she might have had if things had been different. But mostly, she thinks about the life she's built from the ruins of exploitation, a life that's smaller in some ways but infinitely more authentic. She's learned that victory isn't about overcoming adversity or conquering limitations. It's about accepting yourself as you are, setting boundaries that protect your peace, and recognizing that you deserve respect not despite your disabilities, but as a whole person who happens to have disabilities. The settlement money that once seemed like a curse, a reminder of everything she'd lost, has become something else entirely. It's freedom. Not freedom from pain or struggle, but freedom from the need to justify her existence to people who refuse to see her humanity. In the end, Maggie's revenge wasn't about destroying Victoria. It was about choosing herself, finally and completely. And in that choice, she found something Victoria's superficial success could never provide: genuine peace, authentic connections, and the quiet triumph of surviving and thriving on her own terms.